Hello guys, Dr. Nami here. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. This video is going to be part of a 12-step series geared towards parents who are thinking about transitioning their children out of a traditional educational classroom or traditional educational system and considering beginning on the journey of homeschooling. And so there's a lot that's involved, and so I decided to break it down into 12 individual steps. This is going to be the first of those series. I'm going to kind of go through all of those in detail. And let's just talk about why a parent may decide that the traditional school system may not be for them. You know, nowadays, especially post-pandemic, a lot has changed. If you look at most, especially public school systems, most teachers are underpaid, underfunded, and undervalued. So sometimes that make it challenging when you're consistently asking teachers to do more with less, the teachers to provide the quality education that they intend to provide. And the answer to this is not necessarily, put in more resources to the school systems, because a lot of that's dictated by taxpayer dollars. Oftentimes, it's try to figure out how to stretch the budgets. And so what you may be looking for your child may simply just not be available in the educational system that they're in. Other things that have to do with peer-to-peer interactions. For example, if you're sending your child to a school system where they're constantly being bullied, they're being hazed, now with the advent of social media, a lot can occur just over the internet. It may be better for the sake of the well-being of your own child to take them out of that classroom system that you can't control and educate them in a home setting where things may be a little bit more controlled. And so those are, some of the various reasons why a lot of parents nowadays are considering taking their children out of a traditional classroom system and considering homeschooling. The other aspect is, where your child may be. Some children, I'd say the traditional education system caters towards the mean. So if a child is average in their performance, academically, socially, they're probably going to be met because the traditional education system is teaching towards the mean. However, if you have a child who's significantly advanced, right, or a child who's significantly behind, the school system just does not have enough resources to either get the child who's behind caught up or take the child who's advanced and progress them further. So in that setting, your child who's advanced may be sitting there bored while the teachers assist those who are behind as far as their normal curriculum, and vice versa. If you have a child who's significantly behind, that child may be relegated to a cohort that is, almost an underperforming pathway where they may never truly catch up with their peers. And some of this is not, due to any fault of the teachers. If you consider a traditional classroom, say there's one teacher to even 15 children, which is a favorable number. If one of those 15 children is significantly advanced, how can that teacher during the course of an entire day teach two separate curriculums? One meant for the rest of the class who's at level and a different curriculum meant to advance that child who is ahead. It's nearly impossible to do. And so in those settings, the children who are either really behind or really ahead almost get shortchanged. Now, one might say the answer to that would be to consider skipping that child. But when you skip a child, then you've put a child who's younger than their peers, right, in a classroom with older children. Older children generally do not want to hang out with younger children. Especially at the elementary school level, age is almost a discerning factor for how children choose to interact and who they choose to interact with. So if you have a child who's of kindergarten age, who's in a fourth grade classroom, which fourth graders want to hang out with the kindergartner? So that may leave your child feeling somewhat isolated, which may make that less of an ideal scenario. Hence the reason why a lot of parents at that point will consider bringing education into their home and taking some charge of that educational system. That way their children are not hampered by either being advanced or being significantly below grade level, and they can still progress at their own level. And so a lot of parents are doing this, and the need has been there. This is building up, and post-pandemic, a lot more parents are considering this. So this is kind of a video that shows the first step of 12 steps as to how to begin this process, okay? So the first step to starting this process is to research your own state's guidelines in regards to what it takes to pull your child out. every state has very specific guidelines and rules that govern who can be homeschooled. Okay, so if you decide just to stop sending your child to school and you haven't followed these guidelines, right, the school can then say you're neglecting your child. They can take action and put your child back in the classroom with whatever legal resource they have. But if you follow these guidelines, right, then you're protected. Okay, so every state has their own governing body. I'm in the state of North Carolina. In the state of North Carolina, it's the Division of Non-Public Education, which oversees homeschooling, right? And so when you go to their website and you start to look in their guidelines, for the state of North Carolina and many states, the process starts by writing a letter of intent. And that letter or notice of intent says to the school board that you are planning on homeschooling your child at home. In most states, this letter needs to be submitted prior to the beginning of the school year. And that letter essentially needs to state the child's age, their date of birth, the class that they're intended to be, and the level that you're planning to educate them. Once this letter has been filed with the respective divisions that govern this, they should acknowledge that they've received this, just to then clear you so that you know that you're homeschooling and they also know that you're homeschooling. Okay. The next step is to think about qualifications. Luckily this is fairly easy for most states, and you have to obviously research your own individual state. The qualification is that the teacher, which is usually a parent or a legal guardian, must have completed at least a high school diploma or some equivalent of that. And so if you have not completed a high school diploma, then you may either want to have somebody who has completed a high school diploma work in conjunction with your homeschool curriculum program, or go ahead and get that diploma. So that's the first step. The third thing to consider is whether standardized testing is required, and every state is very different. Most states will require some form of standardized testing, although in a lot of states, the report for that testing does not need to be reported to the actual state. So you'll have to check your state's laws. Here in North Carolina, it's the EOGs, or end of grade examinations, that your child will sit for. And those tests allow the state and yourself to measure where your child is relative to their peers. The next thing to keep track of is record keeping, okay? You want to show a record of attendance for your child. As silly as it is, because they live in your home, you want to show that they have been attending school, they have been attending classes, and you almost want to mimic what a regular school day will be like. In some states, they actually have requirements for how long your child must be in school for. And a lot of those requirements will state that your child needs to be in school for anywhere from 9 to 10 months out of the year. And so you'll want to research your own state's guidelines to make sure that you're in compliance with their record keeping. The next thing to think about is the curriculum. Most states will indicate what subject matters need to be taught. For a lot of it, it is English, math. Some states will be specific and say they must also cover science. And so once you have the subjects to be taught, then you can then pick a curriculum. Most state guidelines will not tell you what curriculum they insist you use, which gives you some flexibility. And so many of the curriculums out there have kept this in mind and are essentially designed to be able to meet the criteria, okay? And then there's some small little caveats that I'll cover. For example, immunization. Interestingly enough, in a lot of the states still require your child to be immunized, even though they're in the comfort of your own home. So that's one of those things you'll have to look out for. And then the last but not least, thinking about dual enrollment. So as a homeschool parent, if you do not have all the resources, a lot of states will allow you to be dually enrolled in either a community college setting or even sometimes in high school. That way some of the coursework that you need can be obtained. If you are unsure about the guidelines, what I would recommend is looking at some of the states that have very strict guidelines. For example, New York State has very strict guidelines about what can be taught, and then making sure that you're meeting that minimum criteria in order to make sure that you're in compliance, okay? So just to recap, the first step is to research your state's guidelines, making sure that you're in compliance with all of those. Once you've done that, then you want to do an assessment of your time, your skill, when you have the ability to teach, who is going to be assisting you with teaching. And the next set of this next series, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about some of the next steps to take. But hopefully this has been helpful as far as that first step of how to initiate the process of homeschooling your children. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Take care.